Well, hello. Good evening, one and all. And well, um, what a day it has been. Um, certainly, certainly not since the days of Theresa May have we seen, shall we say, such an interesting PMQs in quite some time. Definitely, there was no doubt at all that Jonson had to go on the offensive here. He had to show some strength. And interesting things have happened. That's to say the least. But of course, still no word from the 1922 committee on the number of letters they've received. Of course, that is kept secret until they reach the magic number. But we're going to have to wait and see what happens. We're just going to go over this before we start, because again, this news has just come out. But needs to say, like I say, this day, I think it's made this week even more interesting. I'll tell you that now. I think, like everyone else, I was, shall we say, expecting quite a lively PMQs. And that's exactly indeed what we got. So before we go diving into all our stories this evening, and even later on, we're going to be checking in with our good friend Jeff to see what he made of today's events. So that'll be fun for us in a bit. But yes, welcome, one and all. Who we got in the chat? So, Janet, evening to you. Dude, evening to you. Cathology, evening to you. Dave Walker, evening to you. Mickey D, evening to you. Xavier, evening to you. Oh, Xavier, hello from Romania. Evening to you. Oh, yes, you are right. We will be going over this. For those of you who may or may not know, who, like I say, I followed the events this afternoon, and very shockingly, there was a defection by a guy called Christian Wakeford. He was a Conservative MP. He's now a Labour MP. So we have had a defection. That was even before PMQs kicked off. So, however, and we'll get, like I say, we'll get into the whole defection thing in a bit, because, like I say, that may have been, could have potentially saved Boris's bacon today. We're going to have to see how we say the week certainly plays out. But what he did there, don't get me wrong, incredibly brave, of him doing that, deciding that he's going to, shall we say, jettison the Tory party and then cross the aisle, as they say, over to the Labour Party. Very brave thing to do. Obviously, the dumb left here in this country, to steal a phrase from the Majority Report, are outraged that a Conservative MP dare walk over across the aisle and be welcomed into the Labour bosom. Quite frankly, if this was Corbyn in charge, they would be cheering from the rafters at this. It's only because Keir Starmer is in charge. And of course, many people on the left just still can't accept Starmer's in charge. And as I've said before, Starmer, look, he's got a lot not to like, and he's got a lot not to go for him. But at the moment, he's been doing some pretty good stuff recently. His shadow cabinet has also been making some good moves, announcing a wealth tax, a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies. And yet the left, of course, is never, ever going to be satisfied. Look, sometimes, guys, you never get the politicians that you 100% want or even going to agree with. Sometimes you've got to go with a guy that you only agree with maybe 50% or even 30% of the time. Just think of it this way. Who would you rather be in power? Another 5 years of this particular Tory government continuing with their awful policies, or would you like a Labour government? Yeah, might not be as left-wing as you might hope or even want. But hey, if you are active and you're getting engaged with them, then you might be able to pull some Labour policies more to the left. And who knows, if these policies turn out to be successful, which they will, because the only alternative to a lot of these terrible strategies we are seeing are some very, very good left-wing policies, and there are those out there, and there are still Labour MPs on the benches who desperately need your support when it comes to these things, then you need to support them. You know, you don't just get to say, I'm going to support them one day and then not support them the rest of the time. Sometimes you've got to support MPs and, again, parties that you may not 100% agree with. If you don't like it, well, guess what, guys? Join the Labour Party, start changing it from within. You've done it once before, why can't you do it again? So that's just me annoying all the lefties again. But yeah, needless to say, very, very, very interesting activities definitely today in the House of Commons today. However, literally, I think just shortly before going to air, I noticed this piece from The Independent. So we're going to go over this. Now, this pretty much indicates that, to me, Jonson has very, very clearly indicated he is now certain there is going to be a no confidence vote coming. Of course, the question is when. Well, it depends when the Tories decide to, again, get rid of him. As I've said before, many times since this all started to happen, since this weekend, if the Tories don't get rid of Jonson, then the opposition parties can paint the entire Tory party as being approving and not holding their leader to account when he does something wrong and even lies to Parliament. That is not going to be a good look, not only for the Red Wall MPs, and don't worry, we'll get into them soon, but it's not going to be a good look for the whole Tory brand as a whole. And hopefully, what we want the Tories to realise that Jonson is not good for their brand anymore, so we've got to get rid of him. That's what we've got to push them into. So let's go diving into this and find out a bit more about this, because it almost seems certain the fact that this statement has come out from Number 10 is almost now a certainty that Jonson thinks there is at least going to be a challenge potentially coming for him. Oh. There we go. So Boris Johnson will fight any vote of no confidence brought against him, a senior Downing Street source has said. The Prime Minister's press secretary has told reporters that Mr. Jonson continues to believe he is the best person for the job and intends to lead the Conservatives into the next general election. So straight away, Jonson has indicated he ain't going anywhere. Jonson has clearly indicated, he has said, I don't care about any faults, no matter what, all this stuff that has happened. Not only just that, but the faults of what happened throughout the coronavirus crisis that he has caused through his poor planning and general disarray. Again, we heard him today at PMQs lauding the fact of, we weren't in the European medical agencies. Well, guess what? We could have done all that and still been in the European medical agencies. Starmer should have taken to on that. He should have reminded him about the death toll that we have here in the UK, one of the highest in the world, and at one point, the highest in the world, during a time when he was praising about how fast we'd had the vaccine rollout. Again, I'd like to remind him, even though we will quote the first to start vaccinating, again in questionable quotes, but when other countries started to vaccinate, not only did they end up catching up to us, but they even surpassed us. again, something I would have liked to have seen Starmer take to him today on that. But, oh well, sometimes you have missed opportunities here. So, Mr. Johnson's position is in peril due to the anger from Tory MPs over the string of reports of parties at the Downing Street during lockdown. At least 7 Conservative MPs have called on the Prime Minister to resign, and there are reports of at least 20 or more submitting letters of no confidence to the chair of the backbench 1922 committee, Sir Graham Bradley. Now, of course, that doesn't meet the threshold. We need about 52, I believe it is. It's either 52 or 54 letters we need. Currently, that ain't enough. That would mean if we've got 20 confirmed, maybe 7 more, that's 27. That ain't enough to call this yet. However, and this is the big however, only 5 have publicly confirmed letters, and Sir Graham has not revealed how many he has received. He must order a no confidence vote if 54 Tory MPs demand one. So, publicly, only 5 have actually declared. Out of what we can see here, again, reports of 20. If you add the 7 on top of that, 27. We're not there yet. I think, unfortunately, a lot of them are waiting for that Sue Gray report. I think they want to see how bad that might be, or if they can get around it. One of the things that we've covered this week is a lot of Johnson supporters, even though they might not be diehard Johnson supporters like there were, the Cameroons, the people who supported David Cameron, or the Mayites, the people who were really, backing Theresa May. There are no Johnsonites because there is no Johnsonism. But there are, however, backers of Johnson, purely for the fact that Johnson has forged this bizarre electoral coalition and essentially managed them to win this majority that they now sit in and enjoy. As far as they are concerned, they do not care that Johnson does this. They fully knew about Johnson and his attitude and how he was going to carry on with all this. They fully knew how he was going to carry on with all this. They just didn't care. What they wanted was that Johnson electoral magic. And as so long as Johnson can deliver that, they do not care. Johnson could be caught in number 10 with his pants down, sleeping with a prostitute. They would literally not care so long as it keeps that Johnson electoral magic. So you are right, Paz News. It is a bit of a pantomime. But as I said, one of the things that the opposition parties need to do now is they need to start painting the Tories in this bad light. They need to go, look, if you're not getting rid of Johnson, then it doesn't matter that you're saying he should resign because you have the tools in your toolbox to get rid of him. And you haven't done that yet. So we can only conclude that you are condoning the Prime Minister's actions. That's the point we need to get to. And once we can get to that point and start getting that across, that's when Tories are going to start to worry, because that's going to start damaging their Tory brand. And that's when they might actually finally start be putting some pen to paper. Yeah, and you are right. Because the no confidence vote is a secret ballot, you don't know who's going to vote to back Johnson and who's going to vote against him. So even if these letters do go in and there is a vote of no confidence, are they going to win it? that is, again, a big political gamble. It's not just calling for the no confidence vote in the first place. It's a matter of actually winning the vote after. And even then, if it does come down to this vote, and let's say Boris Johnson wins by a country mile, then the opposition parties need to start talking up about the fact that the Tory party has basically turned around and said what Boris Johnson did in those parties at Downing Street, they are fully in favour of. And that will really start to put the cat among the pigeons again. So anyway, so to remain leader, Mr. Johnson would have to win votes of more than half of his parliamentary party, currently 180 MPs. Asked whether the MP would fight to save his job if subjected to a vote of this kind, his press secretary told the Westminster press briefing, yes. But challenged over whether he would expect to win, she replied, that is getting into a hypothetical. Our focus is very clear in terms of delivering the ambitious agenda we were elected on in 2019. We want to continue to work together as Conservatives to deliver this. The press secretary then said that this was the focus of Mr. Johnson's discussion with the backbench Tory MPs, who had been meeting privately since yesterday and today as he battles to try and shore up his position. She denied the reports that the PM was in tears at one of these meetings as she asked what more he could do to remain in post. I have seen the report. It's not true, she said. He regularly meets MPs and was doing exactly that yesterday. He will do the same today. The broad message of all these meetings is to focus on what we've been delivering for this country so far since we were elected, from getting Brexit done to the record investment in local transport, infrastructure, to tackling the unprecedented pandemic. We've constantly made tough decisions which have resulted to us in being in the position we're now. We've delivered the fastest booster rollout in Europe. We are at 57% in terms of boosters, and I can tell you probably now, just because of how the vaccination program went, I can probably tell you there are other countries that are catching up to us or maybe even have passed that. So yeah, good luck on that. Like I say, some stuff the opposition I wish they'd be bringing up time and time again on that, but we have the most open economy. Not really something to brag about, considering, again, as Keir Starmer, and I'm glad he's bringing that up today, the number of deaths that were reported yesterday, and the fastest growing in the G7. Hold on, let's fact check that. Fastest growth in the G7. Because I'm pretty sure that is not true. Let's fact check that on the fly while we are here. Ah, yes, as I thought. So, yeah, this comes from the 13th of January in 2020. So what has been claimed? The UK is the fastest growing economy in the G7. The verdict, this is from Full Fact, the verdict, that's true if you look at change over the most recent 12 months of data. If you look at growth over the last quarter of data, second quarter to third quarter of 2021, the UK places fifth. So it's not 100% true then. No surprise. So it's not exactly true then. So by looks at this, it is, according to this, it's France, Italy, Germany, Canada, the UK, the US, and Japan. So obviously, while we do have a fast, shall we say, bounce back in some areas, if you again cherry pick the data, like it does seem to have, like they do seem to have here, then yes, you can claim that as some sort of truth. However, when you look at the data, it doesn't really reflect that at the moment. So yeah, you get another lie there by Boris Johnson. And enables to make the decision we have today about lifting Plan B restrictions. Again, that could backfire. Again, this is a double-edged sword about wanting that, because it's just like, I can't believe there is relifting these restrictions. Again, COVID is still very, very much with us. We are still seeing very high death rates, very high hospitalization rates from COVID, very high still infection rates. And now you've taken these Plan B restrictions away. The worry is what happens next. That's the big thing. What happens next? So the current system under which the no confidence vote is triggered is if 15% of the Tory MPs request one is introduced by the former leader, William Hague. Theresa May was forced to fight a confidence vote in December 2018 and then sailed through by 200 votes to 117, only to be forced out of office by more brutal means 6 months later. The only Tory leader to have actually been forced out by a vote like this kind was Ian Duncan Smith, defeated by 90 votes to 75 back in 2003. So this to me says there's one coming. This to me says there's one coming, and Johnson knows there may be one coming. If Johnson for the past 2 days has been going around and again trying to meet backbench MPs to try and again shore up his support, it really is a question on the clock. It really is. Will Johnson be Prime Minister at Christmas? Doubtful. Very, very doubtful. Will he be Prime Minister in 6 months' time? Who knows? Will he be Prime Minister in 3 months' time? Who knows? The only people who can really decide that at this moment in time are indeed the Tory party. So let's go on to this, because this was the other shocker of the day. That, well, Tory MP, or should we say Labour MP now, Christian Wakeford, defects to Labour, blaming the PM's disgraceful conduct. So he is one of the new intake of the 2019 intake that, again, very much of the, shall we say, new intake, former, quote, red wall Tory MP, that happened because of this. So we now have to see, of course, what happens. We've gone through this week a couple of times about focus groups that have been going off here in the red wall. They had numerous focus groups so far who've, again, were Labour before but voted Conservatives, some of them for the very first time in 2019, not one of them said that they will be voting Tory next time around. And to stay in power, Boris needs to win the red wall again. He needs to win he needs to win that again. He needs to. Or else, well, interesting things can indeed happen. But again, that's another talk for another time. But good on this guy for doing what he did. Like I say, it is actually quite a brave thing, doing what he did, because again, doing this walk across, as they say, this defecting, is seen very, very much as an act of political betrayal. Needless to say, his name is probably mud at the Tory HQ this evening. But we have to ask the question of, was this done out of self-preservation? Did he do it out of because he generally believes this is, disgraceful conduct? I, for one, at the moment, I'm going with it's the conduct of the Prime Minister. But if we look for the past couple of weeks, he has been one of the forefront leaders complaining about Boris Johnson over Partygate. He's been at the forefront of this. So was it a surprise? Absolutely. Defecting, especially in the way that he did it, again, is seen very, very much as an act of supreme political disloyalty. And as I think Cathal O'G just said at the beginning, it might be that this defection has put maybe the brakes on some MPs now sending letters. This act may potentially save Jonson, but the question is for how long. We really, really don't know what could that be. Like I say, at the moment, Jonson is holding, shall we say, his time in sand in his hands, and it's very rapidly spilling from them. But let's dive into this story about this, because, like I say, I think this had not only this, but we'll get into what David Davis said later as well, which was very, very interesting, which will also have repercussions as well. But we'll dive into this. So the Tory MP Christian Wakeford has defected to Labour, piling more pressure on Boris Johnson as the growing numbers from within this party call on the Prime Minister to resign. Just minutes before Prime Minister's questions, Wakeford, elected as MP for Bury South in 2019, crossed the floor to sit with Keir Starmer's party, declaring in a letter to Jonson, resigning the Conservative whip, that he was once incapable of offering the leadership and government that this country deserves. This move will prove a huge embarrassment for Jonson, who is now fighting to avoid enough of his own backbenchers submitting letters calling for a no confidence vote. 54 are needed to trigger the ballot, and many of those who have written letters are members of that 2019 intake. I've said this before. These new red wall Tory MPs, as they are often called, they're the ones who are most desperate to try and separate themselves from the rest of the Tory party. They do not want to be seen as, Tory toffs, essentially. So during and ever since the 2019 election, they have been fighting to try and get as far away from that image as possible. They have been the loudest voices in the Tory party calling for the investigations into PPE scandals. They have been the ones, again, loudest voices in the party shouting out against the corruption that went on just a couple of weeks ago. His newest one from Hartlepool, where Jonson was literally 3 months ago celebrating with her for winning the by-election, was calling on Johnson a disgrace of what was going on in the Tory party. And now they are also the loudest bunch calling over Partygate as well. Because they know come next general election, they've heard it firsthand. I've just talked about the focus groups that have been going on. They know full well next election they're going to have to go to their constituents and say, this is what we've done for you. And remember, at the moment, we just did the article today covering the NPI report over investment in the North. They haven't delivered. They've had 2 years so far, and so far they haven't delivered on the promise of levelling up. Not only that, but you've got the white paper for levelling up finally meant to be coming out, apparently. When, of course, it's meant to be soon, but we don't know how soon. Like I say, it's been delayed twice. So whether this will appease them is another point, of course. So in the letter to Johnson released on Wednesday afternoon, Wakeford said he believed the policies of the Conservative government that you lead are doing nothing to help the people of my constituency, and indeed are only making the struggles they face worse on a daily basis. He raised concerns about the cost of living crisis, about how the country should emerge from the COVID pandemic. Wakeford said the UK needed a government that upholds the highest standards of integrity and probity in public life. He added, sadly, you and the Conservative Party as a whole have shown themselves incapable of offering leadership and government this country deserves. Wakeford said he was in no doubt his constituents would be best served by my joining the party that generally has their interests at heart, and admitted he had wrestled with his conscience for many months. But he said the decision was about much more than your leadership and the disgraceful way you've conducted yourself in recent weeks during the investigation into alleged rule breaking held in Downing Street and across government. Wakefield said Starmer had, quote, shown the integrity in a way that he has led his party on the issues that matter to me, not in least the vital challenge of combating anti-Semitism, he added. Charges that can only be delivered by a Labour government with Keir Starmer. To the raucous cheers in the Commons chamber, Starmer warmly welcomed Wakefield to the opposition benches and gestured to the other MPs sat directly behind him. Like so many people up and down this country, he's concluded that the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party have shown themselves incapable of offering leadership and government this country deserved. Johnson did attempt to appear to be bullish in front of his own MPs, telling them the Conservative won Bury and South the first time in generations under this Prime Minister, with an agenda of trying to uniting and levelling up and delivering for the people of Bury and South. We will win again in Bury and South the next election under this Prime Minister. Given the votes and the focus polls and the polls we have seen in these seats, not likely. Not likely at all. Like I say, Boris ain't fighting Corbyn at the next general election. Again, a lot of people forget the 2019 general election. It was very, very much a lot of people in the North did not want to vote for Corbyn because, again, they fell for a lot of the media spin because Corbyn and co decided that they didn't want to play the PR game. One which I said for a while, if they didn't play, they would have serious repercussions. Didn't matter how good their policies are, didn't matter that when you went to the public and you put the Corbyn's policies to the public, they were overwhelmingly in favor of them. The second you said that these were the policies of Jeremy Corbyn, they turned off. Because that was the damage that Corbyn and, again, the left decided not to play. And as a result, they let the right set the agenda. And by the time they realized it was far too late, and at the 2019 general election, All the studies that have been done have shown it was one of the very two key things. Who would make a better prime minister? Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn? And when it came to that question, many people in the North, even though, again, they voted Labour all their life, felt that Jeremy Corbyn was going to be a far worse prime minister than Boris Johnson. As laughable as that may sound now, you've got to think and look back to 2019. That was the case that was put before many people in the North, and that's why a lot of these red wall seats went to the Tories for the first time in generations. You look forward now to the next general election, a lot of those red wall seats are going to go back. The data, the polls, the focus groups, all are saying that. So that was easily one of the first big shocks of the day. However, wasn't the only one that Johnson had. Wasn't the only one. Because David Davis came out as well. And Davis is what is known as probably one of the Tory grandees. And because he is, a Tory grandee, he is very, very much, has a lot of power and sway in the party. And there's one thing that is currently uniting a lot of, shall we say, the newer Tory MPs, along with these old ones, is the facts of the parties that have happened. They're just as shocked by what is going on here. And they're worried about their chances down south because the Lib Dems have shown that they can win in some of the very, very strong Tory heartlands. And for the next general election, those are going to be seats, are going to be their target. Because, as I've said before, the Tory nightmare is simply this. Not only do they lose the red wall, but they also lose the blue wall as well. And if that happens, that could result in a complete and utter Tory collapse. We're talking almost total wipeout. It could be absolutely catastrophic if that happens. Now, what the chances of that happening? Not too much, but there are, shall we say, a video that I'm doing tomorrow. I'm releasing tomorrow, so keep an eye out for it. Let's just say Nigel Farage might be back with a vengeance at the next general election. Trust me, it's going to be a humdinger of a video tomorrow to watch that. So watch out for that one. But anyway, we'll get into this because this is itself, and Davis speaking out will have a lot of complications because of this. So this is from the Yorkshire bylines, and of course Davis won for quoting not only Oliver Cromwell but other, shall we say, famous parliamentarians. You have sat there too long. In the name of God, go. Today's PMQs was one of the most extraordinary witnessed in the last 20 years. Whilst the Prime Minister was combative, the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, was on fire. In fact, the gags were so good, some were wondering if he was multitasking as Prime Minister in waiting and stand-up comedian. But it was left to someone from Johnson's own side, and a Yorkshireman to boot, to really put the knife in. Standing to speak in the Commons today, David Davis, MP for Hartman Price and Howden, called on the Prime Minister to go, saying, "I've spent weeks and months defending the Prime Minister against often angry constituents. I reminded them of the success in delivering Brexit, but I expect my leaders to try and shoulder the responsibility for the actions they take. Yesterday, he did the opposite of that. So I will remind him of a quotation altogether far too familiar to him, of Leo Ameley to Neville Chamberlain. You have sat there for too long, and for the good of you, all of the good of you have done, in the name of God, go. The extraordinary PMQs came back of the extraordinary 24 hours in politics for both Johnson and the Conservative Party. Having gone through the weekend without any fresh revelations causing any real problems, the Prime Minister faced an interview with the feisty Beth Rigby of Sky News. The feeling that he might be able to rescue this very dire situation caused by Partygate was short-lived. And let's face it, who on earth thought that being interviewed by Beth Rigby was going to work in his favour? The interview was excruciating to watch. The clincher, of course, was his desperate reply to her, questioning about his attendance at the Downing Street party at the height of the first lockdown, saying, "Nobody told me it was against the rules." That line led to an instant hashtag frenzy on social media, with "nobody told me" trending for much of the day. It was the first time Johnson had appeared in public since the stories emerged of the party held in Number 10 and the evening before Prince Philip's funeral. He looked like a man beaten before he had really even entered the fray. And of course, now it goes on to ask the question of, again, have enough letters been sent? We don't know at this moment in time. Trust me, we'd have heard. However, given the fact that you've got the statement from Number 10 saying that Johnson would fight any vote of no confidence, we can safely say to assure at this point there might be one coming, and Johnson probably knows it. Of course, the next question is can he win it? Can he survive it? We don't know. Glasgow Kiss puts it perfectly. Yeah, it's a very vague estimate at the moment. They estimate between 20 to 40 letters. Those are the estimates that are going around at the moment. Of course, the only person that does know, of course, is the chair of the 1922 committee. But again, due to the 1922 committee rules, he can't actually say how many letters have gone in until, of course, they reach that magic number. And then, of course, the vote of no confidence is a secret ballot, and that has a whole host of complications, of course, when it comes to that vote itself. So, what else happens? Of course, we have to ask that question. What will indeed happen? And could Johnson's resignation happen? And indeed, we must ask the question, why could it happen? And for that, we turn to the always excellent political reporting done, of course, by politics.co.uk on this. So, why could Boris Johnson's resignation happen? We've seen this play out before. And I think there's two very key situations that could happen here. One, this could be Johnson might be gone by Friday. He could be gone by tomorrow, for all I know. He could resign tomorrow morning, for all we know. Like I say, the last 24 hours have been incredibly turbulent for the Prime Minister. So he could go. Who knows? Oh, thank you very much, Capital OG. A hilarious unforced error by Jonson to say he didn't recognise the quote since it's his name, since he has his name on the Churchill book cover. Very true. Very, very true indeed. For a very prominent Churchillian historian, that is quite embarrassing to say he didn't recognise the quote. But needless to say, this will either be happen very quickly, or it will be very drawn out. It will be very drawn out indeed. Obviously, we've got probably the biggest challenge to Johnson, if he does stay, will be the May local elections. And that could indeed hurt a lot for the Conservatives. And they've got to weigh up the political calculus of, do they keep him or do they let him go beforehand? Remember, as I said just a few moments ago, one of the big things that is keeping Boris Johnson is his electoral magic. There are a lot of the Tories are prepared to accept all this for. They don't care what Johnson does. They do not care at all. They just want that election magic. And if shall we say, his opponents can show that electoral magic has now worn off and is gone, that maybe it was just a one-off to never be repeated, then they'll get rid of him as well. You know, I said it before Christmas, and I'll say it again now. There's a lot of Conservatives who got that pro and cons column and weighing it up, keeping it how it does. Yeah, you are, again, good point. Yeah, he doesn't have the self-awareness to resign. That it could be very true as well. That could be very, very true as well. And yes, you are right, Cloudhopper, as well. The Stormont election could play into some very, very interesting complications, especially over the negotiations of Liz Truss over this. But also we have to be very, very worrying, of course, over how the DUP and the Unionists might react to, well, Sinn Féin taking the Stormont. They could very well just pull out of the power sharing agreement altogether. Of course, if they do that, that could lead to other problems in itself, but that's something we're going to have to wait and see for May to see what happens there. But anyway, let's go diving into this. So, if Boris Johnson's New Year's resolution was to leave behind December's stench of scandal, he has surely failed miserably at the first stretch. First, news came of the email sent by his private principal secretary, Martin Reynolds. This was leaked to the media. The email, dating back to May of 2020, invited over 100 plus staff to make the most of the lovely weather via a socially distanced drinks reception in Number 10's garden during the national lockdown. Mr. Johnson's former director of communications, Jane Slack, issued the unreserved apology to Buckingham Palace after it was reported that a party was indeed hosted for him at Downing Street on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral. The government's image continued to take a hit after it emerged that suitcases had routinely been ferried with alcoholic drinks from the nearby supermarket to the Number 10 and the Cabinet Office. It has also been claimed that both the Prime Minister and then his fiancée Carrie Salmons also attended. Hitherto, Boris Johnson has been something of the Teflon Prime Minister. The Patterson probe, the Hancock affair, even Dominic Cummings' Bernard Castle debacle seem to have only made a minor and even temporary dents on the Prime Minister's poll ratings. With the Conservatives moving up slightly in the polls over the new year, there were indeed initial signs that even the party revelations in December might even fail to make terminal damage on Mr. Johnson. So, with this latest slew of headlines, will this finally be enough to foil the man known for his ability to scrape his way out of both personal and political scandal? Unlike Thatcher's technically riddled Westland affair and the mass protests directed against Tony Blair over Iraq, the issue of the lockdown partying is a straightforward example of hypocrisy on an issue directly relevant to voters' everyday lives. As Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey put it to LBC during last week's eruption of the scandal, these revelations feel like a kick in the teeth for everyone who sacrificed so much during the pandemic, and will surely prompt many members of the public to reflect on the personal difficulties of their lockdowns that were so regularly fought with. The notion of Number 10 being forced to apologise to Buckingham Palace is also a disaster for the Prime Minister's image. Indeed, the indirect influence over this event cannot be underestimated, given the respect Elizabeth II still commands as the most popular public figure in the country, according to the YouGov figures. The question of the Prime Minister's conduct is also something that unites both the pro-lockdown majority and the vocal minority of the lockdown skeptics, with both groups lamenting the government's failure to live up to the standards that thousands of regular people have been prosecuted just for violating. Just as the Brexit vote that sealed Mr. Johnson's rise to the top of the Transcendent Party political strips to the vocalised of a tidal wave of discontent, so too could the Prime Minister's spalling incidents of lockdown hypocrisy be the linchpin to the rising discontent to his leadership. The opinion poll also found that 68% of all Britons' opinion of the PM has worsened, including 55% of Tory voters, and over 80% of all Brits say that they now trust the PM and his government less than before. Well, a poll released by Salvator Coms Res on Tuesday showed that 70% of people believe the allegations ought to be investigated by the police. And like I say, we have been seeing these polls come out very thick and fast, especially the ones involving the Red War, and the fact that you've got voters basically saying, I ain't ever voting Tory again after this. I've learnt my lesson. And like I say, next general election, if Johnson wants to retain power, he has to win those Red Wall seats. He has to retain them. If he loses them, that's the Tories out of power. And as I said, nightmare Tory scenario. Both the Red Wall and the Blue Wall go. It might be a long shot, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. So it might have become something of a cliche to claim that Red Wall voters are unconcerned about the so-called Westminster bubble scandals. Recent surveys suggest otherwise. According to last week's Delta poll, the survey of about 57% of over 57 constituencies where the historic Labour seat switched to the Conservative campaign to get Brexit done, Labour were averaging 49% and the Tories just 33%. Although it is unlikely that we'll see Boris Johnson and his aide in court for flouting the lockdown rules, these polls could indicate indeed place an uncomfortable ceiling on his ambition to try and bounce back. The Savannah and Comries polls also represents a jump of 12 percentage points from the figure in the polling firm recorded in response to whether the PM ought to quit last month, showing that Mr. Johnson's situation has only deteriorated over these series of scandals characterising the close of 2021 in Westminster. While Britain's parliamentary democracy means that local MPs are voted in by general elections, this is not so for prime ministers. The impact party leaders have on the public mood towards their party adds a very heavy presidential element to this process, which could indeed work against the Conservatives if Mr. Johnson remains unpopular. James Jonson, the co-founder of JL Partners, a polling firm, and indeed former Downing Street pollster, wrote in response to the news, "Expect polling advice. This is extremely bad." While he added, I do not doubt how the long-term effect of these parties is, referring to his comments in the Times newspaper, that those who say that the slew of stories about lockdown parties now make the Conservatives unelectable may be disappointed. However, he did add that there was absolutely no doubt that 28% is a dire polling result for the Tories and a clear sign of the anger out there, even if it is in the heartland of this media storm. Indeed, It will be the 2019 intake of MPs in particular, as today's pork pie rebellion reports. The Berrien South defection confirmed that they look upon this as a stormy forecast and fear for their own majorities, and will act against Number 10 accordingly. The widespread public awareness of this escalating Partygate affair lays the foundations for the issue that grow ever more totemic around Mr. Johnson's political brand. With over 60% of voters telling the Opinio that the latest admission will now affect how they will vote in the next general election. Again, these are some very, very interesting numbers and polls that we're seeing on this. None of these look good. And you know the Tories have seen these. You know full well the Tories have seen these. They're looking at this, thinking, what do we do? We're just going to have to wait and see on this. Definitely wait and see. So, as Alwyn Turner, the author of the last several best-selling volumes of British post-war history, told politics.co.uk, prime ministers tend to be broken by the same thing that made them in the first place. Margaret Thatcher was the voice of the respectable suburbs until she became enamored with the world stage and forgot her roots. Tony Blair was a pretty straight kind of guy until the country decided that he'd lied in order to go to war. Gordon Brown cared about equality and he could be trusted with the economy. Then the banking crash destroyed that image. He argued that given that Boris Johnson's greatest selling point was that the roast and beef and real aid drinking Englishman and the laughing Cavalier up against the Jeremy Corbyn's Puritans partying was that we expected and wanted of him. However, he stressed that this behavior was indeed likely to be criticized by voters given the occurrence that Mr. Johnson and his ministers were urging the rest of us to exercise restraint. After nearly 2 years of tying our social and even our moral belts, we're not quite keen on our boisterous bluff Boris anymore. Indeed, amongst his true blue base, the Prime Minister's perception has also been plummeting, with another analysis released last Wednesday suggesting nearly half, 49% of the Conservative Party voters, said that they believed Boris Johnson should resign, while 70% of the voters agreed he should step down. And of course, it's not just the Conservative Party voters here. It's not just the parliamentary members here. It is his cabinet as well that is also in a flurry about this as well. Saying the government's top team is largely choked full of MPs who owe their rise to Mr. Johnson's ascendancy, while it could simply take the unravelling of yet more indefensible events for those who seem the staunchest of the Prime Minister's loyalists to rally around a successor. The crucial ministerial line that the public ought to wait for the Grey Report to judge the PM suggests we are not yet at such a stage. In an interview with BBC Radio 4's Today programme earlier this week, even the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab had admitted, when quizzed over the Downing Street parties debacle, if he's lying deliberately in any way you describe, if he's not corrected immediately, it would normally be under the ministerial code and governance around Parliament to be a resigning matter. And of course, Dominic Cummings is here again. Dominic Cummings is also now alleging that himself and others were witness and are willing to swear under oath that Boris Johnson lied to Parliament about these parties. And more damning photos of said events are circulating the iCloud is surely yet another tiptoe towards chaos for the Prime Minister. And like I say, this is the big one now. The fact that, as Johnson has been saying for quite a while, not Johnson, Cummings has been saying this for quite a while, that he and other witnesses are very, very happy to go on under oath for this. Not only that, you may remember, of course, let the bodies pile high comment. Cummings has said that before, that he has witnesses who will under oath testify that this was indeed said and are willing to face the legal consequences for it. So the fact that they are saying that is quite significant. So I think maybe tomorrow, maybe this week at some point, maybe expect more photos. Maybe expect more revelations. It could be a very, very interesting week. Tomorrow could be just as interesting as today, maybe even not more. So, while the cabinet may be hoping to cling to their line that the conclusions of the Sue Gray inquiry ought to settle the matter, the ongoing drip of information regarding the illicit events could continue to infuse the political atmosphere with a stench of scandal. This could either increase voters' general mistrust of Mr. Johnson's image or lead to a formal and more dangerous proceedings for the MP if any outright dishonesty towards MPs were unveiled. While the Prime Minister continues to stress that Sue Gray's inquiry will determine whether he broke the ministerial code, it is not certain that this is the outcome that will seal his fate. If Mr. Jonson is perceived by the public to have been embroiled in the constant wrongdoing, it will be that will eventually decide his fate, whether over the next few days or over the next few years. With further letters of no confidence rolling in from more backbench MPs, however, Boris Johnson would be wise to keep abreast of the winds of February and, of course, as the Ides of March. Indeed, very, very interesting times ahead. Very, very interesting times ahead, as I'm sure you can see. But as Glasgow Kiss pointed out, he may just decide, well, I'm not going. I'm not going. He may decide that. And of course, it will not be for Boris Johnson to decide who goes. It will be the Tory MPs. They're the ones that have always had the power to decide how long Johnson stays there. And I've said before, if you look across the pond, look at Trump. The Republicans had so many times where they could have reined in Trump or said enough is enough and told him to stop and reined him in. They chose not to. They chose not to because of what was happening with their base over there in America. And it's sort of a very similar thing at the moment over here. Many MPs are choosing not to get rid of him because of that electoral magic that I mentioned earlier. What needs to be shown is that electoral magic is no longer a thing. Just as we have seen here, at the next election, these are all going to come in as well. So before we go today, what has Jeff thought to all this? What has Jeff thought about all this? Oh me, oh my. Oh me, oh my. Let's just speed up as well.
Hello there. So, people are worried that if Boris goes, Brexit goes. But are they right? There's a lot of talk today that Sir Graham Brady, the chair of the Tory party backbench 1922 committee, might end the day with a safe stuffed full of letters of no confidence in Boris, so be forced to start the process for a party vote of no confidence in their leader. And as far as many see it, if Boris ends up being forced out of number 10 by this, we'll end up with the Remainer as Prime Minister and it's goodnight Brexit. But I would not be...
Wait. Wait. How is that going to happen? How is that going to happen? Again, I'm always shocked by about the amount of views that Jeff has here for his sparkling take on the political days. What Remainer are you talking about? Are you talking about Liz Truss? Of course, she had a road to Damascus conversion moment, has been firmly in the camp of the Brexiteers. I thought Jeff would have loved that. Again, which Remainer are you talking about?
Too sure about that. Yes, the BBC and the lefty mainstream media are all over this Partygate thing and are pushing to give Boris the old heave-ho. And Boris does deserve a bit of a bashing over it. But the public dissatisfaction in the Prime Minister runs much deeper than a few lockdown-breaking parties, because those parties are a symptom of something that runs much deeper. Boris was weak with his number 10 and wider Downing Street team over these gatherings, but he's also been weak with France and the EU over the fishing issue by giving far too much ground. He's been weak with Brussels over the...
Okay, so this is... So Jeff here is taking the Brexit angle of all this. A little bit too fast. We'll go down a bit there. But yeah, Jeff is taking the Brexiteer angle of all this, that Boris isn't delivering Brexit. Again, this time last year, as you may very well remember, Jeff here and many of his fellow Brexiteers were celebrating Brexit from the rafters, saying Boris had done Brexit. In fact, we could go back into Jeff's video catalogue and pull up that video of Jeff celebrating Boris and getting Brexit done. And as one of the things you may remember, I've always said about the Brexiteers, Brexit is never enough. It's always something more. They always want that more. Going all the way back to the beginning of all this, it's always never enough for them. You've got Boris Johnson, who has delivered an incredibly hard Brexit. But even that is not enough for them.
The Northern Ireland Protocol by refusing to authorise the use of Article 16 to remedy the imbalances in trade and political stability in Northern Ireland, all caused by...
None of the political instability has been caused by the EU. It has been caused by the fact that essentially Boris lied to get the DUP on side to get his Brexit deal through. He lied to them and then threw them very casually under the bus. And Jeff here and no other Brexiteer can explain, once you trigger Article 16, what are the consequences for this? How do you solve the Northern Ireland problem then, Jeff? No Brexiteer can answer those questions because there is no answer. They have no answer.
An intransigent EU hell-bent on breaking up the UK. He's committed the country to a nation-destroying green agenda because he's been weak with the Green lobby, mainly headed up by a section of his own family. He's been weak with regard to the plush red carpet that now adorns the English Channel. Forget this new military involvement. Unless there's a real change in the law, they'll just make the red carpet operate more efficiently. And it's now totally apparent that he's been weak with our scientific lobby.
On the immigration thing, we now have an incredibly strict and stringent immigration regime that has been put in. Something which Jeff argued for. Even Nigel Farage, of all the people, has argued for this. And even to them, it's not hard enough. You know, as in Brexit, as with all things, it's never enough. Never enough for them.
And allowed himself to be led by the nose into economically disastrous actions, all based on flimsy and, in most cases, extremely erroneous data. Although it's not data, because data is facts, and what he was spoon-fed with were not facts. And how about the plan to sack tens of thousands of non-compliant NHS staff, something that could ruin the service for decades, and therefore ruin the Tories for decades?
You mean the fact that they have chronically underfunded the NHS for at least the past decade hasn't ruined the NHS, Jeff? Oh, my word. This, ladies and gentlemen, is your typical hard right, far too far gone conservative voter. There's no reaching Jeff. there is no reaching Jeff over this. There is no reaching Jeff. You know, you could lead Jeff to water, but he wouldn't drink. He would be thirsty, but he would die of thirst.
Then there's the breaching of his manifesto promises over no tax rises and trashing the state pension triple lock. It's all this weakness that has resulted in an overall general dissatisfaction with Boris Johnson.
Yeah, all that happened throughout last year. All this was happening throughout last year. This is the first time Jeff's mentioning this. Methinks the Jeff doth protest.
And that overall weakness with the people around him has led him by default to be tough on the wrong people, those at arm's length that voted for him. It's all this sort of stuff.
Oh dear, Boris is betraying the people. They're going for that line.
That has caused the Tory plummet in the polls. Be in no doubt, those poll ratings are nothing to do with a successful Starmer-led Labour Party. No, Boris and his Tory...
Then what are they responsible for, Jeff? You know, Starmer's gone up in the polls. If Starmer wasn't being successful, then he wouldn't be going up in the polls. But he is. You know, you can't deny that. So, sorry, Jeff.
Tories lost that support, and as ever in our two-party state, it automatically leaked off into the red camp. And if it was all just about Partygate, and Boris was strong in these other areas, then the press would be peeing into the wind. Now just say that more than the required 54 letters of no confidence do hit Sir Graham Brady's inbox, and that there is a vote of MPs' confidence in their leader. Firstly, there's no guarantee he would lose that vote. He could get a stonking majority voting that they do have confidence in him. But if he did lose, there would be a Tory party leadership election to replace him as party leader and as Prime Minister. And as I said, many people are frothing at the mouth in the belief that such an outcome could end up with Brexit being all but reversed.
Jeff Taylor here, ladies and gentlemen. The political analysis genius. Can anyone tell me, given the fact that the two frontrunners for the leadership race are Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, who are both very much pro-Brexit, can anyone point me to the fact that they might just decide to reverse Brexit? What are you on about, Jeff? What are you on about? I just can't at the moment. This is why I'm so shocked that there are some people out there that take Jeff seriously. I'm sorry, I just can't. Oh, I don't even want to read the comments. I don't even want to read the comments.
But would it? How would Brexit supporters react to a new Tory leader who said, "Hey, I don't care about that anymore. I'm going to sign up to some Brussels control and ECJ jurisdiction. Roll out an even plusher and wider red carpet to be nice to the..."
Boris agreed to that in the negotiations. Why weren't you annoyed when Boris was touting the oven-ready deal? Both him and Frost negotiated that deal, which you are now so annoyed about. Again, go back in Jeff's videos just a year ago, and he was praising the oven-ready deal as being fantastic.
French so as to allow them to offload more of their problems onto us. I'm going to raise even more tax and increase foreign aid. Well, you might get that one in spades if Rishi Sunak of Tory tax and spend ends up in the hot seat. How about if the new Tory leader said,
Rishi Sunak is not tax and spend. Again, he's been doing everything in his power to actually undermine the Prime Minister, his key policies. He's been underfunding many of the Boris Johnson's key promises. He's been saying, here's not all the money, here's some of the money, and only been doing tax rises when he has himself had to admit that there is no other option but to raise taxes. He himself has said on several occasions he wants to cut taxes before the next general election. Again, the sterling political analysis here by Jeff Taylor.
I'm going to be a good neighbour and allow more EU fishing in UK waters. I'm going to go greener than Boris ever dared to, and I'm going to double down on no jibby, no jobby, because scientists are always right. So if there was a leadership election, which can...
There is no single Tory leadership potential successor to Boris Johnson who is saying any of that whatsoever. This is, Jeff has gone well and truly off the rails here on this one. Well and truly off the rails here.
Candidate would you push for? Someone who laid out that personal manifesto, or one that pushed a more traditional Conservative agenda? One who said they would push through to complete Brexit properly and fight the UK's corner? And how do you think the internal party discussions would go on all of this? And of course, the choosing of the new leader would, as ever, turn into a sort of national debate, but with only Tory party people being involved in the actual choosing itself. But the likes of the BBC would, of course, be giving as much airtime as they can to the most pro-EU candidate they can find on the slate, as well as anyone who would help them keep their licence.
What pro-EU candidates? What pro-EU candidate? Oh my God. Does Jeff even follow politics, or does he follow the fantasy land of the Express? And I've said this before. I've said this before on many an occasion. Jeff is what happens when a living version of the Express comes to life. Yeah. Then Tom Nelson, you are right. I did miss on that. I was going to say something about that, but I didn't, because, saying that a scientist is never wrong shows that Jeff has no idea how science works. Yeah, but then most people who criticize science are themselves not science and are doing so for political reasons, though they won't ever admit that.
Fee intact. But the traditional, as well as the new but temporary red wall Tory supporters, would have an awful lot of impact on that result, as would the spectre of Nigel Farage standing in the wings ready to strip out those blue voters. So in reality, what are the chances of ending up with an anti-Brexit type leader? In reality,
zero. If Jeff, right, honestly, I'm looking at the view count. There's 18,000 views on that. If Jeff says anything other than zero, Jeff here loses any political cred he ever has. Not that he had much to begin with anyway.
Reality. If one was elected based on lies and was found out to be an EU wolf in sheep's clothing and started handing the country over to Brussels, how long would they last as the Tory party slumped even further in the polls? How soon would letters from constituents to MPs become letters of no confidence from MPs about their new boss? and also consider how many Conservative voters would be writing to their local Tory MP and making it quite clear that if they choose the wrong leader, they're out at the next opportunity. Anyway, I do get the impression, and it's just a personal impression, that the Conservative Party as a whole quite likes Boris and understands that he is an election winner when...
Not given today's PMQs. Not given today's PMQs at all.
He wants to be. And it might be that there is a vote of confidence, but I think he would win it. And his party might view that as the required...
What gives you the impression that he would win? Currently, obviously there are all odds on that Boris may survive that. He may narrowly squeak through, and that is possible. But I think there are enough Tories now that do recognise the fact that the longer they keep Johnson in, the more damage he's going to do. And that if he's there at the next general election, even Boris Johnson's electoral magic or black magic or his magic wand that he can somehow wave across the red wall ain't going to work. It ain't going to work the next general election, I can tell you that, especially come April when the cost of living price crisis really starts to hit. I can tell you now, those new red wall Tory MPs are going to be up in arms come April if Boris Johnson's still there.
Shot across the Boris bows to force him back onto track and back into popularity. But would Boris see it that way? And would it prove to be a missed opportunity to install a new Prime Minister who would take a fresh broom to all the difficult stuff that Boris has brushed under the number 10 carpet? And the timing would be right for a replacement with over 2 years to go to the next general election. So
that's Jeff there. Jeff Taylor there giving us the true political take on all this. Of course, I can't say anything more. That Jeff has given pretty much the fantasy version of what's happening in British politics there. And yes, dude, yes, you are right. He hates Boris now. And like I say, don't believe me, go back a year in Jeff's videos. This time last year, Jeff was singing the praises. Jeff was singing the praises of Boris Johnson about his Brexit deal and how fantastic and wonderful it was that Boris had got Brexit done. And a year later, like most of the hardcore Brexiteers, Brexit is just not enough. It's never enough. They always want more. And again, yeah, just out of interest, yes, you are right. Is Jeff based on Fantasy Island? He could very well be based on a fantasy island somewhere. I have often maintained the fact that the Daily Express that we get in this world is actually printed in a parallel universe where, in fact, the Daily Express is actually true. And the Daily Express that gets printed in this world is actually really left-wing, but it just goes to the alternate universe. that's what I'm going with. That's how I believe the Daily Express exists in this world. But there you go. So yeah, that's Jeff's take on this. Yeah, crypto island. That's it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We don't want to talk about the crypto bros here on this channel. I don't want to summon them. But, you know, they say if you say it 3 times, it summons them. I don't want to summon them. So yeah. That's today's political fun that's happened today. Will Boris survive this week? I generally don't know. I genuinely, seriously don't know if Boris will survive this week. We're going to have to see what happens tomorrow. As was said there, it's very likely that there are more, should we say, photos, maybe more emails floating around in the cloud that could maybe be released. Oh, who knows? Who knows what may happen? Part of me thinks that somehow Johnson is going to survive all this. There is a part of me that somehow thinks Johnson is going to survive all this. 'Cause, as I've said before, Johnson has survived scandals and political scandals that have killed and got rid of far more competent politicians than him. So we're just going to have to see how all this plays out. But I'll tell you now, it would not surprise me if Johnson survives. It would not surprise me if Johnson survives this. But after this week, next Monday, if Johnson still hasn't gone, or there's been a vote in no confidence or whatever, it is not going to be fast. This is going to be slow and a long, drawn-out process. Will Boris Johnson be Prime Minister by Christmas 2022? I don't know. I genuinely can't tell you at this point. Like I say, Johnson has survived so many scandals at this point, and his reputation as the Teflon Prime Minister is somewhat very well deserved. So this may yet be another scandal that somehow Boris survives. I hope he doesn't, because, like I say, I want to see that leadership contest. I desperately want to see that leadership contest, because that's going to be fun. But as always, thank you so much for watching this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee. We can all buy me coffee. Thank you very much to the people who have sent in super chats today. Like I say, thank you very much for all supporting the channel. Like I say, remember to press that like and share button on your way out. And as always, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you all next this coming Saturday morning. Like I say, who knows what may happen in the next 2 days. I genuinely couldn't tell you. I could not predict what potentially might happen in the next 2 days. I thought Johnson might be gone by today. I was expecting a resignation. To be honest, at today's PMQs, because I don't know how he can sit there and survive that long. But we're just going to have to sit and wait and see here. But it is entirely dependent on the Tory party for, shall we say, how long Johnson actually remains at the seat. So, as always, thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy yourselves the rest of the evening, and we'll see you all very soon for some more fun stuff. But need to say, this week is still going to turn out to be, I think, some more fun surprises still to come. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And as always, we'll see you all next time.